Hey everyone, welcome to The Explainer. So today, we're diving into something absolutely fascinating from the world of forensic science. You know how pop culture is totally obsessed with the whole perfect crime myth? That idea where some clever mastermind just vanishes into the night without a trace? Well, today, we're going to completely shatter that myth. We're looking at how these supposedly elusive criminals get brought down, not by obvious massive mistakes, but by microscopic, totally invisible clues they didn't even realize they were leaving behind.
Okay, let's dive right into this. When we think about physical evidence, right, we usually picture the classics: fingerprints, DNA, maybe some grainy security footage. But what happens when someone successfully dodges all of that traditional stuff? They usually think they've made a completely clean getaway. But the reality? No way. They haven't escaped at all. Actually, they've just stepped into a slow closing trap. As you'll see in today's explainer, an invisible fingerprint doesn't even have to be biological. It can be a quirky habit, a single spoken word, or even just a basic chemical reaction. Now, I want you to keep a weird question in the back of your mind as we go through this. What on earth do a highly formal vocabulary word and a cheap carnival prop have in common? I know, it sounds like a totally bizarre riddle, but I promise you, by the time we finish this forensic countdown, this weird connection is going to make complete sense. And honestly, it's going to completely change how you think about cold cases.
So here's our evidence log for today. We're starting with the perfect crime myth, then we're moving right into our first case file, trapped by a word. After that, we'll uncover a 65-year secret, and finally, we'll wrap the whole thing up by looking at the delayed reaction trap.
All right, let's get into it. Section 1, the perfect crime myth, an illusion shattered.
The absolute core concept I want you to take away here is that evading justice is essentially just a delayed reaction trap. A criminal might commit a crime, walk away, and think the coast is totally clear because the sirens are fading in the distance. But that seemingly successful getaway, it's really just the start of a countdown. And that countdown is triggered by a tiny, completely overlooked detail, just a piece of unexpected evidence lying totally dormant until the right investigator, or, sometimes just sheer luck, comes along and activates it.
Moving on to Section 2, Trapped by a Word, the Freeway Phantom.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is just this single, isolated word, tantamount. In the incredibly chilling case of the Freeway Phantom, investigators were just desperate for leads. The perpetrator had totally avoided leaving any traditional physical evidence behind. But then, they found a note tucked inside a victim's pocket. And in that note, the author used this highly unusual, extremely formal word, tantamount.
So, just a quick vocab refresher. Tantamount means equivalent in seriousness to or virtually the same as. It's not exactly a word you drop in casual conversation, let alone in a note left at a crime scene. But this isn't just an English lesson for us. This specific definition actually represents a crucial invisible behavioral fingerprint. The killer didn't leave a literal oily fingerprint on the paper, but by choosing to write this specific, grandiose word, they left a massive psychological footprint that would eventually blow the whole cold case wide open.
So the crucial point here is how this one single vocabulary choice set off an unstoppable domino effect. Investigators eventually zeroed in on a suspect named Robert Elwood Assens. And when they dug into his background, that word, tantamount, it kept popping up like a flashing neon sign. They literally found it in his old court papers. They discovered a judge had actually used that exact word while speaking to Assens in court. And the absolute nail in the coffin? His coworkers testified that Assens absolutely loved dropping the word tantamount in his daily conversations. I mean, the Freeway Phantom managed to evade police for decades, but his own vocabulary trapped him. Okay, on to Section 3, a 65-year secret, a bizarre chemical trap.
65. That is the truly astonishing number of years our next subject managed to hide in plain sight. Seriously, imagine a mystery remaining perfectly frozen in time for over 6 decades, passed by thousands and thousands of people who had absolutely no idea what they were actually looking at.
Let's see how this builds across what is, frankly, an absolutely absurd timeline. Way back in 1911, there was this unsuccessful train robber named Elmer McCurdy, and he was killed in a shootout. After he died, a funeral director embalmed his body, but he didn't just use the standard fluids, he used arsenic. And the specific chemical concoction worked a little too well. It perfectly preserved McCurdy, basically turning him into a mummy. So for the next 65 years, this preserved body actually traveled around as a carnival prop. People were literally paying money to look at him, completely convinced he was just this creepy, fake attraction made out of wax and plaster. And that brings us all the way to the 1970s, right in the middle of a television shoot.
So during that 70s TV shoot, the crew is moving what they think is this cheap carnival prop. And then the unthinkable happens. The prop's arm breaks off. But instead of wax or plaster on the inside, they're suddenly staring at real human bone. I mean, can you imagine? That discovery obviously sent shock waves through the crew and the local authorities. The sheer preserving power of arsenic had kept a 1911 train robber's cold case completely hidden in plain sight for 65 years. All it took was one clumsy moment on a set to finally solve the mystery. Which brings us to Section 4, the delayed reaction trap. Time solves cold cases. And this brilliantly illustrates just how vast the spectrum of invisible evidence really is. On one hand, you've got the words we write, a psychological, behavioral choice like randomly deciding to use the word tantamount. And on the other hand, we have the chemistry we leave behind, a stark physical, scientific reality like a body preserved in arsenic. Now, these are totally different types of evidence. One is just a habit of the mind, and the other is a literal chemical reaction. But they both reinforce the exact same truth. Time and science will inevitably turn those unexpected, overlooked little details into definitive, inescapable traps.
We've seen how a single, arrogant vocabulary word brought down the freeway phantom. And we saw how a funeral director's random chemical concoction solved a 1911 shootout decades later on a TV set. It really just proves that the perfect crime is nothing more than an illusion, just waiting for the right moment to shatter. Which leaves us with a truly fascinating question to end on. In our modern world, with all of our digital footprints, our weird habits, and hyper-advanced science, if a single spoken word or a basic chemical can trap a criminal 65 years later, what invisible fingerprints are we leaving behind today? Thanks for exploring this with me, and always keep questioning the details.